My name is Paleo, and I have a problem. I love My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. A lot. I can usually come to terms with my obsessive interests throughout my life and justify them pretty easily. For instance, dinosaurs? That's easy. They lived in a world so different from ours, and who doesn't love learning about them? Video games? Another easy one. They're possibly the only true form of interactive entertainment, and can attract a variety of players. Whales and dolphins? While not typical for males, they are still very intelligent and powerful beings that can capture anyone's imagination. But this? How could candy-colored ponies ever appeal to me? Well, you better grab a snack and a drink, sit back and relax, because this is going to be a long explanation. I suppose I should tell you about how I came across the show in the first place. I had already seen images of it before, but really never paid much attention to it. It wasn't until someone I follow on YouTube did a video with it, and I started looking at the related videos. Most of them were just fan videos and animations of the show that I thought were funny despite not having seen it. At this point, I just thought they were making fun of a crappy straight-to-video Flash version of My Little Pony aimed at little girls. But boy was I wrong. I eventually started looking at the different clips of the show, and I actually got a laugh out of them. Being a fan of cartoons that can get me to laugh, I decided to start watching with the first episode. I was already intrigued since the show had broken my preconception about it being low quality, in both animation and writing. I kept watching, and by the third episode I thought, okay, this isn't so bad. After watching the entire first season, I thought, wow, this was actually good. Then a few days passed and I started to think about the show. I usually don't go back to a show unless I really enjoyed it, so I started watching the episodes again. By this time I'm thinking, actually, this is really good. Then I had an epiphany. I love this show. Not only is the cartoon good, but it's animated well, has great characters, has some hilarious and awe-inspiring moments, has terrific voice acting, and even has some fantastic music. How could a cartoon about My Little Pony, a franchise that was designed to sell toys, be so good? Well, let's start at the beginning. On October 10th, 2010, Discovery Communications and Hasbro launched a channel to replace Discovery Kids called The Hub, a family-oriented channel that would air programs based on the franchises that Hasbro owned, and some acquired content such as Fraggle Rock, Goosebumps, Batman, and others. There are some completely original shows like R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour, which is obviously a spiritual successor to Goosebumps, Pound Puppies, and a new favorite of mine, Dan Vs. But you may be more familiar with some of the original shows based on the franchises that Hasbro owns. Things like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and of course, My Little Pony. The new iteration of My Little Pony was conceived by Lauren Faust, who was a storyboard artist, writer, director, among other things for the cartoons The Powerpuff Girls and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, both created by her husband, Craig McCracken. And she was also an animator for a few animated films, like Cats Don't Dance and The Iron Giant. She approached Hasbro about her own project, Milky Way and the Galaxy Girls, but was suggested to work on a new cartoon for an already established franchise. Lauren was a fan of the toys in the show when she was a kid, and wanted to work on the show with a predominantly female cast like her project, so she decided to take it up. Lauren Faust isn't the only person that works on the show who has an excellent background. There is also the story editor, Rob Renzetti, who was the creator of My Life as a Teenage Robot. And the writers on the show consist of people who have also worked on Foster's and the Powerpuff Girls, as well as some other great cartoons. In fact, one of my favorite writers on the show, M.A. Larson, actually worked on Symbionic Titan as a writer. Who knew? I think CR on Familiar Faces, who did a retrospective of the My Little Pony cartoons, put it best. It was basically the perfect storm. Not only do you have experienced people working on a cartoon for a girly franchise that hasn't really had much work on it in recent years, but you have people who specialize in making endearing female characters as well. Then you have it airing on a new network, so the chances of it getting canned within the first season are slim to none. I suggest you watch CR's episode of Familiar Faces for his own explanation of the show's beginnings, since he goes a bit more in depth than I do. You can find a link in the description. Anyway, after a while, some articles pop up about the show denouncing it, some before the show even aired. And you know what happens to opinions on the internet. They get criticized. So people got curious and decided to check out the cartoon. And there was this slow expansion of people who loved the show. And recently in the past year, if you're not aware by now, that expansion has become an explosion. Though if you don't care about the people involved or how the show got started and became popular, then you're probably wondering, so why is it good? Tell me already. Well, let's start with the animation. I've always been very adverse to cartoons on TV that are animated with Flash. I have nothing against Flash, but I was always used to seeing it in online cartoons that don't really have a big budget for animation, so I've seen Flash on TV as sort of a cop-out for quality. The model animations typically look very static, and the expressions usually lack any emotion. But, as the supervising director of the show Jason Thiessen once said in an interview, it's not Flash, you know, it's animation. What he meant by that, which I now agree with, is that Flash is just a tool, like any other. If he saw someone half-assing a few frames with a sloppy tween, he would kick it back and say, "I want to see acting!" And man does it show. The expressions and movements of the characters on the show are just excellent. Sometimes there are even scenes where it's hard to distinguish whether it was animated with Flash or not. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is actually not the first TV show to contain Flash animation done right, either. Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends used Flash as well. And much like Friendship is Magic, it too showed that Flash cartoons can look really good if enough effort is put into them. But as we all know, something can have good animation but still have terrible writing and characters. Thankfully, Friendship is Magic doesn't suffer from that. I'll keep the explanation of how the main 6 characters start to interact with each other for later, but I will go over the basic premise of the show to give you an idea of just what happens in each episode. The cartoon is about being good friends towards one another, and it teaches lessons about friendship. The episodes usually begin with some kind of problem one of the characters is facing, and it's up to the friends of that character to help them out in some way. This may sound like it's intended for much younger viewers, but in fact, a lot of what this show has to offer can appeal to a much wider audience. One of the things that I think can appeal to just about anyone in this show is the setting. Okay, so seeing candy-colored ponies live in a town doesn't sound that exciting. But there's much more to it than that. This is pretty much a fantasy world. You have Ponyville, your generic small town, Canterlot, your bustling capital city, Cloudsdale, a city in the sky, and a variety of other locales like a desert, a wilderness, and mountains. And what are fantasy settings most known for? The creatures. You already have 2 fantasy creatures, with the Pegasi and unicorns being part of the pony focus of the show. But then there's things like dragons, manticores, griffins, hydras, phoenixes, and a variety of other things that show up as either friend or foe. And there are probably others that we haven't seen yet. Especially since, and this is just a fun tidbit, Hasbro owns the rights to Dungeons & Dragons. Now that I have the setting and basic premise of the show out of the way, I think it's time to talk about what I think is most important about this cartoon, if I were to recommend anyone to watch it. The characters. All of the characters in the show are just great. They may seem one-dimensional at first, but after seeing them interact with each other in an episode or two, you come to realize that they actually have a lot more depth than previously thought. See, in the first 2 episodes, we find out that the main 6 characters represent these 6 elements of harmony, which are honesty, laughter, kindness, generosity, loyalty, and, magic for some reason. But we all know magic is actually friendship in this case, since, you know, the subtitle of the show is Friendship is Magic. However, the mere fact that the characters are assigned these traits doesn't mean that they have to abide by them all the time. There are instances where the ponies face some conflict that causes them to give in to jealousy, fear, sadness, and other negative emotions. Now that you've got a basic overview, I'll go over the main 6 characters in the show. And since I don't want to make this seem like a ranking or anything, I'll go in alphabetical order, starting with Applejack. Being from the South, I usually don't enjoy cartoon characters with country accents. It's not that I find it offensive, it's just that I'm around it all the time, so I find it boring. But Applejack has been the exception. She's possibly the strongest and definitely the most honest of the bunch.
Listen here, what I'm saying to you is the honest truth.
But she actually manages to show a bit of weakness in a few episodes, showing that she's not perfect.
Look, I'm sorry, alright?
Her pride tends to get in the way some of the time.
Don't you use your fancy mathematics to muddy the issue.
But overall, she's a reliable pony that the others can always count on. There are a few southern stereotypes with this character, but at least they're mostly good ones, such as having a pretty good relationship with her family and having a bit of common sense.
You see? That's why we needed to take down all those loose branches in town.
Although at times she's also portrayed as being a bit xenophobic as well.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Je parle français? My sister's speaking it fancy!
Though the fandom takes this way further than the show ever has.
Was your zebra sense a tingling?
She can be a bit strict at times, and she's not the most cultured pony of the bunch.
What's uncool? It means uncivil, you know, bad-mannered. Exactly.
But she always means well. Then we have everyone's favorite bashful Pegasus, Fluttershy. Fluttershy's main character trait is right in her name. She's extremely shy most of the time, and has a lot of trouble both expressing herself and being in social interactions with other ponies.
Maybe. But...
Fluttershy does occasionally come out of her shell once in a while, though, especially when caring for animals. I have to say that I especially like this since it reminds me a lot of myself when I'm around animals. Although Fluttershy may be scared of just about everything, she has some moments of rage when she's pushed just a bit too far. She can also be extremely protective of the pony she cares about, to the extent that she braves her fears and becomes surprisingly intimidating towards whatever is threatening them.
You should be ashamed of yourself. I have half a mind to find your mother and tell her what you've been up to, young man. go over there and turn Elizabeth and my friend Twilight back to normal. And don't ever let me catch you doing this again.
Her kindness often reaches insufferable levels.
I'm just wondering if it's okay if I hold you down against your will for a little bit?
And she showed herself to be truly incorruptible when the villain named Discord tried to convince her that she shouldn't be so kind to others.
Well, it must be so upsetting to know how weak and helpless they think you are.
Not at all. I am weak and helpless, and I appreciate their understanding.
Yes, well, sure, it burns you up. I mean, they're always pointing out your flaws, right?
Not really. In fact, I think I'm awfully lucky to have friends who want me to be the best I can be.
Oh, for goodness sake!
Which brings me to the character with the complete opposite personality in terms of shyness. Pinkie Pie.
Isn't this exciting? Are you excited? Because I'm excited. I've never been so excited. Well, except for the time that I saw you walking into town and I went, but I mean, really, who can top that?
If there was any character that I'd like to have around to cheer me up, it would be this one. She's incredibly hyper most of the time, and always wants to throw a party.
You know what this calls for? A party!
Because, well, she does have balloons on her flank. Occasionally she will break into song, which originally I thought would be annoying, but she actually manages to have some of my favorite bits in the show.
Pinkie, what are you doing? Run! Oh, girls, don't you see? When I was a little filly and the sun was going down.
Tell me she's not.
The darkness and the shadows, they would always make me frown.
She is.
I'd hide under my pillow from what I thought I saw. But Grammy Pie said that wasn't the way to deal with fears at all.
Then what is?
She said, Pinkie, you gotta stand up tall. Learn to face your fears. You'll see that they can't hurt you. Just laugh to make them disappear. Ha, ha, ha. So giggle at the ghostly, guffaw at the grossly, crack up at the creep.
She doesn't really let anything bother her. Most of the time. We have seen glimpses of emotional fragility beneath her outwardly bubbly and indefatigable demeanor. When she believed that her friends no longer liked her parties, she became equal parts sad and resentful towards them.
Sorry I was in such a rush earlier. Had some place to be and couldn't slow down and say hello. You know how it goes. I know how it goes, all right.
She can also be prone to irrational fears of the unknown, even despite her advice to the ponies to laugh at what scares them.
I heard that Sakura eats hay.
Pinkie, I eat hay. You eat hay.
Yeah, but I heard it's the evil way she eats hay.
Overall, Pinkie is just a really fun character, and her bits of randomness have made her a bit of a fan favorite.
You're a great friend. Even if we don't always understand you.
Thanks, guys. You're all great friends, too. Even when I don't understand me.
Then there's Rainbow Dash, who has sort of become an iconic pony for this show for a number of reasons. Her personality is based on the character Firefly from the original My Little Pony, making her rash and competitive, and having an attitude that just embodies the phrase, "Nothing can stand in my way."
I am the Iron Pony!
She does seem to have a bit of a friendly competition with Applejack throughout the series to see who's the better athlete, but her lack of honesty and overconfidence keeps her from getting far.
I lost. Don't feel bad, Rainbow. It's all in good fun. I hate losing.
She may be the tomboy of the group, but she still has her feminine side and isn't afraid to show her excitement.
I'm hanging with the Wonderbolts!
It's also been implied that her competitive nature may be a front to hide latent insecurities as well, as made evident when she was participating in the Best Young Flyer competition.
Why wouldn't I be okay? Everyone's so in love with Rarity's wings that they won't even notice when I totally blow it in the Best Young Flyers competition.
Despite her competitive nature, however, Rainbow Dash is an extremely loyal pony, and will do just about anything for a friend in need.
Now, why don't you tell me all about your issues with Applejack?
I don't have any issues with Applejack.
You don't? Then why are you destroying her property?
Because she asked me to. Right, Applejack? Yes, ma'am.
Now we come to what people might expect from a so-called girls' cartoon. Rarity is the character obsessed with fashion, and while that sounds like an incredibly girly personality, it actually plays a big part in her struggles with trying to please both her friends and clients. The show also tends to focus much more on the business side of fashion. Rarity will often be portrayed as a pony struggling to meet deadlines, as opposed to a girly pony fawning over cute outfits.
Sweetie Belle, what have you done? That was the last of the gold silk. Oh, now I'll have to make more. Oh, I hope I can make more. I'm gonna have to work all night.
which is nice for the male fans and just about everyone else, who would likely be turned off by the latter approach. One thing I love about Rarity is how she has a very sophisticated voice compared to the other ponies, and she makes it very clear.
Ladies, do not flip out, Spike.
However, I was quite in awe.
Despite being the element of generosity, however, Rarity can sometimes be a bit selfish, which makes her a much more well-rounded character than she would be otherwise.
I'm the one who should be mobbed by strangers wherever I go.
Obviously feminine though she is, she certainly is not a weak pony by any means, though her headstrong nature has both solved and caused problems over the course of the series. And then we have... Hey, what a coincidence! It just so happens that the last of the main 6 characters in alphabetical order is my favorite. Not only is Twilight Sparkle my favorite, she's also pretty much the main character of the show in most of the episodes. See, in the first 2 episodes it's established that Twilight Sparkle will live in Ponyville. At first, Twilight is dreading it, since she has always been more focused on her studies than anything else.
Look on the bright side, Twilight. The princess arranged for you to stay in a library. Doesn't that make you happy?
Yes. Yes, it does. You know why? Because I'm right. I'll check on the preparations as fast as I can, then get to the library to find some proof of Nightmare Moon's return.
Then when will you make friends like the princess said?
She said to check on preparations. I am her student, and I'll do my royal duty, but the fate of Equestria does not rest on me making friends.
But long story short, she finds the magic of friendship. She's the one who brought all of the main 6 together in the beginning of the series, so we get to see how they all interact with each other from there. As far as Twilight goes, she's the intelligent, level-headed one of the group. When she sees that there is a problem that needs solving, she'll be there to fix it. Though she does tend to jump to conclusions too quickly in some instances, accounting for her overconfidence in her ability to analyze different situations.
It's okay, Twilight. Even you can't be a super smart smarty smart pants all the time.
She also tends to be a bit OCD. Despite the fact that she tends to come across as the girl next door, the sort of girl who isn't outwardly feminine and dainty, she still is definitely female. This is evidence in things such as her desire to have a sleepover, which of course she insists must be done by the book.
Isn't this exciting? We'll do everything by the book, and that will make my slumber party officially fun.
Aren't you missing some, Pony?
Although not a pony, I consider Spike to be part of the main cast, since he plays the vital role in being Twilight's assistant, and is usually never absent in an episode, even ones without Twilight.
Aw, come on. I said come on.
While he is the only male main character in the show, they don't make him too generic. They call him a baby dragon, but he's probably much older and can speak perfectly and help out the ponies when in need. There's a bit of a surrogate-mother relationship between Twilight and Spike throughout the series as well, and we get to see how Spike wants Twilight's approval, although he is by no means a yes-man to her. Sometimes there are parts when Spike isn't able to please her. It's a give-and-take relationship too, since there are times when Twilight needs Spike's help to get back to reality. It's a pretty touching relationship, and is in my opinion, one of the best in the show. Other than the main cast, there are characters like the Cutie Mark Crusaders, who are these 3 younger ponies in the show that are always trying to get their cutie marks. See, cutie marks are what made My Little Pony unique. Rather than just having it a franchise about regular ponies, each cutie mark on every pony has some sort of significance to what kind of personality, talent, or passion that particular character has. For example, Applejack's cutie mark is 3 apples, signifying her passion for managing the apple farm. Or for a talent, there is Rarity, whose ability is to seek out gems hidden in the ground, making her realize her personal style of fashion. I don't know if they expanded much on the cutie mark aspect in previous iterations of the franchise, but I think they do it really well in Friendship is Magic. All of the ponies start off in life as blank flanks, and they need to find out what they're good at. And these 3 school ponies, Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and my personal favorite, Scootaloo, team up to do things throughout the series to try and find what their passion is, since they're still blank flanks. The episodes with these characters are, in my opinion, some of the more underrated of the series. Then there are supporting characters such as Princess Celestia, the ruler of the land that the ponies inhabit called Equestria, and she's also Twilight's mentor, and the character mentioned at the end of each episode when a letter is written to her explaining the moral. There's also Zecora, a zebra who is a sort of shaman that lives in the Everfree Forest, but doesn't show up quite as often. There are also some minor characters like Cheerilee, Mr. and Mrs. Cake, the mayor, as well as Applejack's family with Big Macintosh and Granny Smith, and Apple Bloom being her little sister, though not really a minor character since she's a bit more developed. And every so often there will be one-shot characters that show up in an episode, and then we usually never see them again. But it's always fun to watch.
Watch in awe as the great and powerful Trixie performs the most spectacular feats of magic ever witnessed by pony eyes!
Another thing I love about this cartoon is that it actually tries to have some continuity with the character development. Okay, so cartoons like this aren't really known for continuity, and I know fans were probably calling BS as soon as I mentioned it. But let me give you a couple of examples. In the first 2 episodes, Fluttershy talked to Spike and befriended the Manticore. Rainbow Dash and Pinkie then brought these up in a later episode asking why Fluttershy is scared of a huge dragon.
Oh, come on! We've seen you walk right up to a horrible manticore like it was nothing.
Yes, because he wasn't a dragon.
Spike is a dragon. You're not scared of him.
Yes, because he's not a huge, gigantic, terrifying, enormous, teeth-gnashing, sharp-scale having, horn-wearing, smoke-snoring, could-eat a pony in one bite, totally all grown-up dragon.
And there was also Applejack's family scene in the first episode, then Twilight asking where they are in the 4th one.
But why are you doing it all alone?
'Cause Big Macintosh hurt himself.
What about all those relatives I met when I first came to Ponyville? Can't they help?
Yeah, they were just here for the Apple family reunion. They actually live all over Equestria.
I love it when cartoons at least try to have a bit of continuity with the characters, because as a kid, that always bothered me when it didn't. While these bits of continuity aren't really relevant to the main plot of the show in any way, they're more like small nods to longtime viewers. So you won't really be missing anything if you watch the episodes out of order. I'm probably giving the writers way too much credit for continuity anyway, since there are a lot of instances where the fans will pick apart anything they do, like with any show with a big fan base. So now that I have the characters established, let's talk about the other elements of the show that make it great. The main thing that I think shines in this show, besides the characters of course, is the writing. I thought this cartoon was going to be one of those educational children's shows, so the writing was the first thing to impress me since it doesn't talk down to its audience. Since the writers on staff all have experience with cartoons that are meant to be cartoons for everybody, not just children, Friendship is Magic comes across as a cartoon that can be enjoyed by adults and children alike. Then there is the humor. I always have a bit of trouble when discussing the humor of a cartoon, since it really makes more sense for someone to relate to the characters first before getting a good laugh out of them, especially in a cartoon like this. Though one aspect of the humor that I think really started to lure me into liking the show was the way that the animation relies on physical expression and movement for laughs, which was something I really appreciate in a cartoon made with Flash, making it feel more like a traditionally animated cartoon. It also uses some pretty amusing sound effects with the expressions, making it very reminiscent of the humor from the Powerpuff Girls and Fosters.
I always put on something a little fancy when Opal's feeling under the weather. Cheers it right up.
Then there are things like the puns, which are aplenty here, though I don't find them that humorous as I find them cute, such as referring to a group of characters as every pony,
Welcome, every pony!
and saying hoof-made instead of handmade.
Look at the borders on these robes. These are hoof-stitched.
And of course all the towns are a play on words like Cloudsdale, Canterlot, Philadelphia, Manhattan, among others. Puns are fine, they're just not for me.
Well. It seems we have some naysayers in the audience.
There's also one thing about this world that I find both hilarious and disturbing. It seems that the ponies rule over the other species of hoofed animals even though all of them can talk. They round up cows, herd sheep, hold contests for pigs. What makes the ponies so much better than the other species?
Ugh, that pony is stubborn as a mule. No offense.
None taken.
There are also quite a few references in this show, from King Kong to Benny Hill to Star Wars, and many others. There was even a reference to Gollum from Lord of the Rings, in the episode called A Dog and the Pony Show.
Yes, gems, precious gems.
There have also been some references to Disney classics such as Alice in Wonderland
I'm late for a very important date.
and Cinderella, though with a twist.
Ooh, Rarity, your glass slipper. Now your prince is sure to find you.
Let's go!
There are also references in the music, like Batman the Animated Series, and The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Understanding medieval Equestria goes in Pony history.
But the main thing that fuels the humor in the other aspects of the show is the interactions with the characters. That's why I talked about them first. Since the main 6 characters all become friends with each other in the beginning of the series, we get to see how they all interact, since before they probably wouldn't think twice about greeting each other. This calls for some pretty interesting episodes involving social problems that anyone is able to relate to, and get a laugh out of, and possibly learn something from it. For example, take Rarity and Applejack, 2 ponies that are pretty much the polar opposite of each other. In the episode titled Look Before You Sleep, They are staying in Twilight's library to go away from a storm going on outside, and are forced to interact with each other. Naturally, the two experience conflict, considering that Applejack is a folksy country pony, while Rarity is a sophisticated, refined pony. And at the outset, neither can stand each other.
Then you place one marshmallow on the top of the chocolate, and be sure it's centered, that's critical, and then carefully put another perfectly square graham cracker on the top. And done! Ta-da!
Ooh. Nah, you just ate them.
You could at least say, excuse me.
Oh, I was just about to, but you interrupted me. Pardon.
There's another case of this contrast with Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie, in the episode Griffin the Brush-Off, where Rainbow Dash is outright avoiding Pinkie Pie in the beginning of the episode, but then comes to realize that they actually have a bit more in common than they thought.
Have you ever seen anything more hilarious?
I can think of one thing.
I didn't take you for a prankster, Pinkie Pie. Are you kidding? I love to pull pranks. It's all in good fun, and Pinkie Pie loves to have fun.
You know, Pinkie Pie, you're not as annoying as I thought. You want to hang out?
That'd be... I'd really... When would you...
A simple nod will do.
Mm-hmm.
There are also some instances where the ponies who interact are somewhat similar and are better friends, yet they still enter a bit of conflict. In an episode like Fall Weather Friends, Rainbow Dash and Applejack have a bit of a competition with one another, yet their methods of competing are completely different.
I win by a landslide. Or mudslide in your case. I am the Iron Pony! Only 'cause you cheated. What? You used your wing power to help you win over half those contests.
Sounds like sour apples to me.
Are you saying you didn't use your wings? Well, no. But you never said I couldn't use my wings. I didn't think I needed to tell you to play fair.
I still would have won even without my wings.
Ha! Prove it.
Gladly.
How? Tomorrow's the annual running of the leaves. I challenge you to race me in it.
Easy schmeezy.
Hold on! There is one condition. The point is to run. So no wings allowed.
No wings?
No problem.
Then there's something like the friendship between Rarity and Fluttershy, where they meet at a spa, but Fluttershy doesn't like being pampered quite as much as Rarity does. I think the point that I'm trying to make about the humor in this series is that the personalities that these characters have interact in such a way that you just can't help but smile at their antics.
Yeah!
Young lady, this is not that kind of party.
Oh! They don't want a party. These ponies want a party!
The last thing about this show that I think is wonderful is the music. I already mentioned how Pinkie Pie occasionally breaks into song, and her songs are always a joy to hear. Well, to me at least. Some have found her a bit annoying. But there are also songs sung by the other ponies. Sometimes it's a solo act, or a duet, and sometimes it will involve the entire cast of the show. These songs aren't what you'd expect from a cartoon either. At least not from the cartoons I've been exposed to. Their production values are astounding, and they're incredibly catchy. I never thought I would catch myself humming a song from a cartoon about a made-up holiday.
Easy task to clear the ground, plant our tiny seeds with proper care and sunshine. Everyone it feeds. Apples, carrots, celery stalks, colorful flowers too. We must work so very hard. It's just so much to do.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
Let's finish our holiday cheer.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
'Cause tomorrow spring is here.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
'Cause tomorrow spring is here.
'Cause tomorrow spring is here.
Now that I know what they all do, I have to find my place and help with all of my heart. Tough task ahead I face. How will I do without my magic? Help the earth pony way. I wanna belong, so I must do my best today. Do my best today.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
Let's finish our holiday cheer.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
'Cause tomorrow spring is here.
Winter wrap up, winter wrap up.
'Cause tomorrow spring is
Thank you, Daniel Ingram, for making such great songs for a cartoon. And the musical numbers aren't the only music in the show that's great either. The background music, produced by William Anderson, is also fantastic. Just take a listen to the music during the scene from the episode Sonic Rainbow. Now, if you've watched this far in, you're probably open to the suggestions of what episodes to watch if you want to get your feet wet. I mentioned earlier that I wasn't going to go over the first 2 episodes, and there's a good reason for that. If you want to watch the show for the reasons I stated before, you might not want to start at the beginning. Why? Well, I'll give you 4 good reasons. Exposition, 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 and, oh yeah, exposition. See, unless someone is really curious like me, I don't think they would watch the entirety of the first 2 episodes. I don't have anything against the first 2 episodes. In fact, they're pretty well made, and they do a good job of putting the setting together. Plus, the second episode has the first song, which is one of the catchiest out of the series. But, to be honest, if I didn't have my policy of watching at least a few episodes of the show before forming an opinion on it, I would have stopped watching within the first few minutes of the first episode. Mind you, this was before I knew about all the great people who work on the show. That's just how I feel things might turn out if someone were to suggest watching the first 2 episodes. I'd really like for someone to go into this without having any previous knowledge about the show like I did. But since you're already watching this, then it's too late for that! Even so, here are 5 episodes that I think anyone might enjoy if it's their first time watching. Dragon Shy. In this episode, a dragon is emitting smoke from the top of a mountain near Ponyville. It's up to the main 6 to visit this dragon, and get him to leave since the smoke is blocking out the sky, and therefore the sun, so crops will be devastated. The problem that arises in this episode is Fluttershy's fear of dragons, and just about everything else, which prevents the main 6 from getting to the top of the mountain as fast as they could.
Your turn, Fluttershy.
But it's so wide.
Come on, Fluttershy. We should be much farther along by now.
You could just leap on over.
I don't know.
There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump. See? It's not very far. Just move your little rump. You can make it if you try with a hop, skip, and a jump.
We don't have time for this.
A hop, skip, and a jump. Just move your little rump. A hop, skip, and jump. 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 A hop, skip, and jump.
Okay, here I go. A hop,
That's it, you got
Almost
it.
there.
skip.
Just don't look down.
This is one of the more adventurous episodes, and one where you're more likely to find other creatures and action sequences. The fans have sort of divided episodes into 2 categories. You have your adventure episodes, stuff like this one and the 2-parters we have at the beginning of each season, and then there are slice of life episodes, which delve a bit more into the characters and are, in my opinion, a bit funnier. If you want more adventure, I'd suggest Swarm of the Century, A Dog and Pony Show, and the Return of Harmony 2-parter. Winter Wrap-Up. In this episode, there is a celebration called Winter Wrap-Up, where the ponies remove the snow, gather southern birds to fly back north, and remove clouds from the sky. I should mention that everything is controlled by ponies in Equestria, including the weather, although there are places like the Everfree Forest that aren't like that.
The Everfree Forest just ain't natural. The plants grow,
Animals care for themselves.
and the clouds move. All on their own.
I'm suggesting this episode because it really introduces you to Twilight Sparkle without having to watch the first episodes, and you get to see how she's struggling to fit in with the rest of the town, since she only just moved to the town 10 episodes ago. Plus, this episode has the song that I mentioned earlier, including an instrumental rendition which is just delightful. Green Isn't Your Color. This episode focuses on the friendship between Rarity and Fluttershy, which seem to be very good friends, but hide their feelings towards one another when one becomes a famous model. I chose this episode because of two reasons. One, because it shows that something that sounds incredibly girly can be really entertaining. And two, the humor in this episode is unprecedented. There are just so many things in this episode that I caught myself and others giggling at. From Fluttershy's actions...
Oh, I'm so frustrated I could just kick something.
To Pinky's stalking of Twilight.
Forever!
And of course...
I photo finish. Have arrived.
Before you say anything, that is not a parody of Lady Gaga, as I've heard so many people say. It's a parody of the editor-in-chief of Vogue magazine, which makes sense considering the situation in this episode.
Vigor!
Party of One. I know I just said that Green Isn't Your Color had unprecedented humor, but this episode really takes the cake. In this, we see that Pinky gets suspicious of her friends when they don't want to go to her after-birthday party that she's throwing for her pet alligator Gummy. This calls for some pretty awkward but really hilarious moments between Pinky and the rest of the cast.
I know you're in there!
Oh, howdy, partner.
Mind if I take a look inside the barn?
No, yes, you can't come in here.
Rainbow Dash just went in there.
Oh, well, she was just bringing in some supplies. Yep, supplies for the renovation. Fixing up the whole thing, top to bottom. Lots of construction going on in there right now.
You heard her? Construction!
Yep, construction. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okie dokie Loki.
And the payoff when she finally snaps is great, and will be burned into your memory forever. And Rainbow Dashes.
Yeah. So, why don't you come with me over to Sweet Apple Acres? No thanks. I'm spending time with my real friends. Isn't that right, Madame the Flower? Oui, that is correct, Madame. Pinkie Pie? Another slice of cake, Sir Lancelot?
I'd love one.
Alrighty.
Sister Hooves Social. This is the only Season 2 episode in this list, but it is truly one of the better episodes to enjoy if you're just getting into this. Here you see the relationship between the two sisters, Rarity and Sweetie Belle, and how they compare to the other sister pair in the show, Applejack and Applebloom. You get to see how the emotions of both Rarity and Sweetie Belle carried the storyline along, and the way they resolve their differences is both clever and touching. The animation in this episode is also pretty well done. It's one of the Season 2 episodes where I started to see them get a bit more confident in what kind of expressions they could get the ponies to make. I started to see it a lot in Party of One, which was on the tail end of Season 1, and again in the third episode of Season 2, which, if you'd like to see another pony snap, I would suggest watching that one.
Hi, girls!
So, if you decide to watch one of those episodes, or even all of the ones I suggested, and you still don't like it, will I blame you for it?
Nah.
Of course not. Nothing is for everyone. And as much as I'd hate to admit it, the show does have its faults. There are some episodes that are, in my opinion, just not on par with the writing that I've come to expect from the show. And as much as I've praised the animation of the cartoon in this video, it's not always flawless. There's even a series on YouTube dedicated to pointing out the animation errors in each episode. I'm willing to admit that there are some aspects of this cartoon that just won't appeal to certain people. And that's fine, to each their own. But there is something else about the show that may turn people away from it, as I've heard people say. But Paleo, I have nothing against the show. It's the fan base I can't stand. All they do is make crappy original characters and look at Rule 34 and spout memes from the show. They're just terrible. Well, you know what? This fan base has actually been the nicest and most welcoming fan base I've ever been a part of. And that's saying a lot because I've been a part of a ton of fan bases. And if there's anything I've learned about being a fan of anything, is that there will always be bad apples no matter what you're a part of. So hating something because of its fan base is no excuse.
Now, what do you have to say for yourself?
As for the actual content made by the fans, I was actually really impressed when I first became a part of this. There are some surprisingly high-caliber fan animations, some fantastic fan music, which has been playing in the background for this video, and even full-fledged games in progress of being developed. I've never seen people so dedicated towards creating fan-made content for a cartoon show. Which brings me to one last thought. Why do the fans love it so much? I've already gone over why I and other people think the show is good, and justified it with the characters, writing, humor, and style that we've all grown to love. But why has it impacted us so strongly? Well, I think another quote from the interview with Jason Thiessen might explain it a bit. He said that he understands by this point why it is that we all fell in love with the show. It gave us an excuse to ditch all the poisonous, self-perpetuating cynicism and bile that we'd become so used to throwing around at the world and at each other, and to just appreciate something sweet and beautiful because it was objectively good enough that we didn't have to feel weird about it if we didn't choose to. I think that quote about it being objectively good enough really puts it in perspective for all of us. Most of us who fell in love with the show did it because we came across it at random, and we weren't really expecting anything from it. And the fact that we got something that many would consider above average in terms of children's cartoons, especially made for girls, just impacted us in such a way that we continue to love it much more than we normally would for a cartoon. It's not simply focus group tested tripe, but rather the creation of passionate people who truly want to entertain both children and adults. But how long will this last? Well, we're about in the middle of the second season right now, and it's pretty much confirmed that there will be a season 3. Lauren Faust isn't the executive producer of the show anymore, but rather the consulting producer. The new guy in charge was originally the director for season 1. That would be Jason Thiessen, someone I've already mentioned a couple of times in this video. And we have all of the same writers, save one new one, so we shouldn't worry about the show degrading unless something major happens. All I can say is that I'm glad I became a part of this when I did, because I get to experience it with everyone else, and make great new friends. Enjoying a cartoon that just can't help but make me smile. So if you're still watching and you're curious about the show, please go check it out. Don't pretend you don't know how. And maybe you'll like it, and become part of something wonderful. I'm Paleo, and thank you for watching.